Welcome to the Myth and Magic Authors Podcast, folklore and fantasy topics aimed at creative storytellers. To write stories and challenge your brain with exciting ideas, delve into these presentations and reflections. See how fantasy realms are based on actual world history, legend, and lore. Study fairy tales, nature fables, and supernaturalism to engage in a jumble of concepts that will trigger your fancy and get you writing imaginatively. Now, here's your host, Neil Mack.
Hello, fantasy fiction fans and all those fantasy creatives out there. And welcome to a very special edition of Myth and Magic, because this week I'm chatting with the published and very successful author Melissa Sercia. Melissa is an award-winning urban fantasy and paranormal romance author, and she has a passion for philosophy and for mythology and all things supernatural. She's the author of the Blood and Darkness series and the beautiful Dark Beast series, and the series that I'm going to speak mostly about, the Immortal Billionaires series. Melissa lives in California with her man and her cat, and when she's not building dark fantasy worlds or slaying demons, you can normally find her in the kitchen doing some cooking and probably drinking a bit of Californian wine. We talk about the writing process, and we especially concentrate on what it's like to write hot and spicy paranormal type stories. And we talk about how to write steamy romance without turning those words into something which is lewd. Her characters are, of course, very charismatic and sexy and hot. And her paranormal romance books are unputdownable. So I'm really excited to talk to Melissa Sercia. So let's go over to California right now. Hello.
Hi.
So, Melissa Sercia, is that the right way to pronounce it before we start?
It's actually Sercia. Sercia with a ch sound. Yeah, it's Italian.
No, thank you. Got to get that right. And you've just recently released a book, is that right?
I did, yeah. I have released, it's called After I Burn. It's a book 4 in my Immortal Billionaires series.
Yeah.
That came out in October, I believe. Yeah, October, November. Yeah.
And I'm speaking in just west of London, between London and Windsor Castle. I live on the River Thames. And it's freezing cold, obviously. So where are you speaking from?
I'm in Northern California. I'm in Monterey County. So it's pretty cold here too, actually, for California. We've been getting some really cold nights and lots of doing lots of fires and the heater on constantly, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I went to Mount Shasta once, that sort of like wine region, and I was surprised how snowy it was. You know, it was quite cool.
Yeah.
So let's talk about your route into writing and inspiration first, and then you can tell us more about the latest part of the I suppose it's a series, is it, that you've been writing?
Yeah, it is a series, and it's kind of going to be an open-ended series, I think, as long as I can come up with new ideas for different characters. But yeah, I'm working on the 5th book right now, so it's been fun.
What was your route into writing? Do you remember writing your first books for other people?
Yeah. So, I've been reading and writing my whole life. And I started out like writing poetry, and short stories when I was a kid. And then it wasn't until I was working a corporate job that I hated. And, I was managing this company. And it was about maybe 35, I think, at the time, when I decided, I'm finally going to write that novel that I want to write. And so I knew nothing, of what I was doing when I began. So I started researching, taking classes, and, reading craft books, things like that. And this idea came to me called Blood and Magic. And so I just started writing it. And it took me a good 5 years probably to really, because the first couple years I was just doing a lot of research and world building. And then when I actually sat down to write it, it took a few months, but the whole process was like about 5 years.
Wow.
And initially I wanted to, try to get an agent and get a big publishing deal. And of course that didn't happen. In the beginning, I got, many rejection letters, things like that. So, I just kept trying, pursuing different avenues, and I discovered a small press named City Owl Press and submitted to them. And, they requested the full manuscript, and literally on Christmas night of 2017, they sent me an email offering me a contract.
Christmas present.
Yeah, it was amazing. We were all, jumping up and down. My mom and my sister were here, and we were, crying and everything. But yeah, it was my goal. I wanted to be published before I was 40. So I got that. So yeah, I did that. And it was great because they also wanted me to publish the whole series with them. So it was a trilogy. Yes, that was my first foray into it. I do consider myself very lucky. It's very rare to get your first book published.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm very grateful for that.
And a lot of people have started to do that, and then they've actually gone a bit hybrid and started to do something on their own as well, because just to see all the craft of it.
Yeah.
I mean, people like me, I've been independent all the way through.
Okay.
But I spoke to quite a lot of other people who've been independent and then they've got a deal and then they've gone back to independent. And it's quite interesting, sort of like mix these days, because a lot of independent authors these days are highly polished craftspeople.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, definitely. And that's what I ended up doing. This last series that I have is independently published by myself. And, I just definitely kind of dove right into it, and I joined, $20 to $50K, and started to, get to know everybody in that industry. And yeah, there's a lot of talented indie writers.
Yeah, there's some great people, isn't there? I love the whole community. Actually, I think that's part of it. There must have been awful, mustn't it, if you were Jane Austen or Charlotte Bronte sitting in your parsonage on your own,
right?
Having to write under a pseudonym because nobody's going to ever print it.
For a woman, yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, I imagine, with the internet now, it has its cons as well, of course, because the market does tend to get saturated. It becomes harder to stand out, and to sell books, but it makes it easier for you to publish your work, instead of having to literally, type it out and send a huge, manuscript by parcel, the old days when you actually walked your manuscript into a company. It's
throw it in the bin straight after.
Yeah, exactly. So, it's definitely easier for people to publish and get their work out there.
So would you call your series, would it be fair to call it dark urban fantasy, or is it something more? Is it like gothic fantasy?
This particular series is, it's more paranormal romance is kind of the genre that it fits into, and billionaire romance is one of the subgenres. My two previous series with my publisher, those were urban fantasy. They were dark, gothic, set in New Orleans, but yeah, no, this current series is definitely more like steamy romance, dark romance. I definitely wanted to try, I was reading a lot of it. And so I found it fascinating, and the readership for it is voracious. They can't get enough of it. So I thought, let me try my hand at it. And I'm really enjoying writing it.
Yeah, I bet. We'll talk about steaminess in a second.
Yeah.
Because I think that's an important thing to talk about. But first of all, would you like to define what the billionaire romance is? Because some people may not be aware of it who are listening to this show.
Yeah, it's essentially kind of what it sounds like. It's the character, one of the character or multiple characters is a billionaire. And then there's a romance that happens between the hero and the heroine. And usually I've not seen it too often where the female is the billionaire. It's mostly the man. And then the woman is sort of, kind of just lives a normal life and is swept off her feet by this, rich guy with all these, private jets and yachts and things like that. And so that's pretty much the genre in a nutshell. And it's usually like a CEO or, there's also like cowboy billionaire too, I've seen, like rancher kind of things. I'm not too familiar with it, but yeah. And so for mine, I wanted to do a paranormal twist. And so they're billionaires, but they're also supernatural creatures as well.
Yeah, that does actually remind one of Jane Austen and Charlotte Bronte, in as much as they often used to have, the governess would fall in love with the owner of the stately home. So I
Right.
suppose our idea of what a billionaire is, which is, as you say, CEOs and private jets, I suppose back then it would have been people who go out hunting every day and they've got 1,000 acre land which they go to do deer hunting in or whatever. So it's similar sort of
Yeah.
idea.
Yeah.
But
That's a really good point. I haven't really thought of it that way, but yeah, you're absolutely right.
the other thing I was thinking of, as you were saying it then, is the pretty woman thing, which is obviously clearly Cinderella.
Yes.
This whole rags to riches, but also there's the tension then between a person who isn't quite of the right class, or you might even
Yes.
say caste. But
Yeah.
of course, with billionaires, they're self-made people, aren't they? And we've got a horrible idea of what a billionaire is now, thanks to your former president.
Right. I know. Yeah. The billionaires in my books are definitely they're self-made, and to me it's more believable that they're billionaires because they're immortal. So they've had this, hundreds of
Right.
thousands of years to
Yeah.
accumulate this wealth and sort of become smarter than the average, human.
Yeah.
So it was just more believable to me to have them be billionaires. I mean, I thought if I was immortal, I would probably find ways to amass great wealth. You would hope so, right?
Well, you'd hope so, yeah. You wouldn't
Yeah.
want to still be working in a McDonald's or
In the pub or something. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, no, it's a fun genre to write in because it's kind of limitless. The outlandish things I can come up with for them, vacations and, just different things that he would do on a first date, for a woman where, in normal world living, we don't live like that. We go on normal dates, but it's fun to be able to kind of, be super outlandish. And it's like, well, he's a billionaire, so, he can get away with it.
So it's not only is it, which we'll talk about in a second, helping people to fantasize about their longings, but also it's also thinking about fantasizing, aspiring to something which probably you'll never get, which is actually
Right.
fantasy, isn't it?
It is.
Just as much fantasy as it is to be walking through a haunted wood with an elf, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because you're not going to be. I mean, I've been on a private jet once, but I didn't. I doubt whether that's going to happen every day of my life.
Yeah, like you're not going to own one, probably. I mean,
I'm definitely
maybe.
not going to own one. I think we can safely say that.
Yeah.
But talking about the Pretty Woman and Cinderella type thing, how do you stand on sort of like fairy tale conventions, like especially the happily ever after type thing? You always get the culmination, and they live happily. How do you feel about that sort of thing? Do you put that kind of stuff in, or?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely like to kind of base things, on either like historical events, mythology. I love fairy tale retellings, set in a modern world. I'm actually working on one. It's sort of like a passion project I've been working on forever. But yeah, I do like it because I feel like those stories are the central themes of those stories are still true. Even though there's magic and they're set in a different time era, it's still good versus evil and, love and wanting that happily ever after. And, with romance, that's sort of like the one rule that you can't break is you have to end the book with a happily ever after for the couple, or a happy for now. But so I think the fairy tale things are really interesting. And I see a lot more all of a sudden lately. I've been seeing a lot more people doing fairy tale retellings of not so much Cinderella, but like the Snow White one is getting really popular. Of course, Alice in Wonderland and various things. But yeah, the pretty woman concept, I think that at first glance, you wouldn't think that deeply into it. But when you do analyze it and kind of go into like the motivations, and obviously she's a prostitute. So it's set in like a modern time. Cinderella was just a peasant girl. But same concept. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, let's get on to the steamy bit. So I guess the sex is hot in these books, otherwise you wouldn't have such a voracious readership.
Right.
So I mean, the question for me really is, I've written a couple of naughty books. My second book was Slutting the Globe, about a woman who has 100 different partners in 100 days. So I kind of I've played around with the idea, but how do you, as a writer, bring sensuality but without turning into lewdness?
Yeah, it's difficult. I mean, it's challenging, I should say, just because, you have to, even though I'm writing about sex, it's still prose, I'm still trying to, and I do like purple prose. I know that it's frowned upon, used heavily, but I do like to sprinkle in some purple prose because it's pretty and I'm a poet at heart.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely like, it's funny because when I write a sex scene, it's the same as writing a battle scene for me. It's choreography,
Yes.
making sure that everything's in the right place and
Staging.
Staging, exactly. And then, one of the tricks I learned from an editor years ago was that to make the scene seem more real and visceral is to have dialogue as well, because oftentimes in real life when where you're being intimate, you're not just silent, and so having some passionate dialogue, having them say how they feel about each other after, things like that, can really connect the two characters together and pull the reader into the scene, and then still making it steamy so that it's reaching that also expectation that readers have for the level of steam. Now they use I think it's the chili pepper emoji to define like how many spice levels it is. So I think mine is like a 4 or a 5. So
Cool.
I was happy with that. But I think it was really hard the first time I started it. I was like almost embarrassed looking over my shoulder, like, what am I writing? And now that I've written 4 of these types of books, it's literally just a day at the office. I don't really think too much about it. And even my family members at first were kind of like, oh, I don't know if we're going to read this one, might be too much. And they actually read them and they really like them and enjoy the stories itself. So
have you got any kids yourself?
I don't have kids. No,
okay.
No, don't plan on having any.
So what family members? Is your parents? Would they be reading it?
Like my mom and my sister mostly. Okay. Yeah, my dad doesn't really. He's not much of a reader. Okay. He'll buy my books just to support me and display them. But my mom loves to read, and so does my sister. So they've both read my books, and I think at first they were kind of like, "Oh, I can't believe you wrote this. This is so steamy." And then I think at some point they kind of forget that I'm the author, and they just get into the story and enjoy it.
That's a really good way of explaining it. Thank you for that. Because otherwise, if you didn't have dialogue, going back to your editor's suggestion about having dialogue, then you would be a narrator anyway. But also there'd be an element of voyeurism in it, because I suppose as you're writing it, you're watching that. So the reader can't help but watch through your eyes. Whereas if you actually get a bit closer, and that, after all, that's what we want to do. We want to have some intimacy. If they start speaking to each other, then you can almost step back and allow the business to continue.
Exactly. Allow the scene to unfold and it comes to life that way. Yeah.
Scene to unfold. Yeah, that's a much nicer way of putting it. So anyway, tell us about your latest release. I suppose you better give us the elevator pitch on that October release then, please.
Yeah. So After I Burn is book 4. It's about Cade Vincent, who is a billionaire. He's a demon who siphons power from other supernatural creatures. That's his main super talent. And he's essentially the villain of the first 3 novels. So this story is his version. I do have a soft spot for villains. I like to give them multi-layers and dimensions. So basically there's a subplot that gets it kind of gets tied up in this 4th book, but the main love interest, her name is Brooklyn, and she is a fake fortune teller. She hosts these she goes to these parties essentially that the rich and famous attend, like charity balls, and she's hired to be a fortune teller. And she does it to try to get close to these people and learn their secrets. So that way she wants to take one of them down without giving too much away. There's someone there from her past that really wronged her and her family, and they're a billionaire and she wants to get revenge. So she poses as this fake fortune teller. And then on the side, she also bartends at a strip club to make ends meet, and has one of her roommates is a stripper and another roommate of hers is a drag queen. So they live that kind of lifestyle. And anyhow, Cade spots her at one of these charity balls and decides that she's the woman for him, and he's not going to stop until she is his. And then there's the 2 different subplots that are kind of going on and climaxing together as far as what he's after, which is this ancient book that holds a lot of secrets to the supernatural world and could possibly aid him in destroying his maker, Lilith, who basically tortures demons down in hell and then sets them loose on earth. So there's a lot going on. He's a
Yeah.
complicated character. The romance between him and Brooklyn is very hot. It's very steamy. They have just that instant lust attraction for each other. And but they're both really messed up people, they're not good people really. So they kind of have to find their own redemption like through each other. And yeah, it was actually my most fun. Like I loved writing that book. I really, really enjoyed it. I could just go into so many different, directions with the characters. Yeah. So that's the new one that just came out. And then I've got the fifth one that I'm working on right now.
All right.
Yeah.
So is that set in a mirror world? Is it similar, a world that we would understand and recognize as this world?
Oh yeah, no, it is literally set in the real world.
And
Most of the books,
set in
modern New York City. I've spent a lot of time in New York when I was younger, so I really wanted to base a book series in New York and kind of name drop some of the places I've loved, going to eat at and things like that. And I have a scene in the first book where she's has lunch at the Met, and after looking at all the paintings, and that was something I used to do when I was younger, is go to the Met and then have lunch there. So yeah, I really wanted to pull from that. I have a culinary background as well, so I do like to introduce food, into the books. I talk a lot about food and drink.
That's good. Well, I like my way of releasing myself from the world of literature is by going and doing the cooking. So I do all the cooking in our house.
Yeah.
And it's just lovely. And I've always enjoyed cooking. It's not like it's a chore. It's actually part of my, I think, relaxation. So I totally agree.
Yeah.
How much of you is in your female character, and how much of you is in the demon?
Yeah, I would say with Brooklyn, I'm a very independent, headstrong female, and I tend to write females that are very much outspoken and like to buck the system and that kind of a thing. So I definitely have a lot of me in her, and those aspects of just her stubbornness and her determination and drive to just not stop until she gets what she wants. And then, I consider myself to be a little witty. So I love writing witty dialogue. And for one of my favorite things is actually to write male characters. Yeah. And I feel I've had male readers tell me that they're believable and it doesn't sound like a woman, was writing them. So that was really important to have that authentic voice. And I like making my male characters kind of snarky and the quippy one-liners, and even though they're like dark and evil, still kind of having this humor, sprinkled throughout, so that it's to let up on those darker moments, kind of a thing. Yeah.
That's going to make a fantastic movie. So who's going to play the parts? Who would you? So say that they've said to you, well, obviously you're the author, so can you help us with the auditions? Who would you want?
Oh my gosh. I know. I thought there's been a couple like male models that I've seen on like Instagram, and they're like book cover models and very popular guys.
They've got to look beautiful.
Yeah, exactly. One in particular, I think his name is Jordy something or other. He's actually a tattoo artist, I think, in London, and he's also a model, and he just really fits the look of Cade. Because Cade's literally covered in tattoos, which is basically to cover up scars from his torture in hell, like literal physical scars. Wow. So and then as far as the girl, I don't know. I mean, there's just, you would need somebody very spunky, like someone who could really take on, probably Margot Robbie. I think Margot Robbie would be amazing as Brooklyn, because she does such a good job playing Harley Quinn and kind of having that extremes, to her personality. And this book was actually sort of like a little bit of a tribute to the Joker and Harley Quinn. I'm a huge fan of both those characters. Yeah, and
it's a very complicated relationship, isn't it? You never really know whether they love each other or hate each other, or maybe love and hate are the same thing. Exactly. They're so entangled.
Yeah, so volatile. Definitely.
So you have your own podcast, Spoiler Country Podcast, don't you? So what's that about?
Yeah, so it's technically not mine. Kenrick and John Horsley. They started Spoiler Country in 2017. and it is a comic book podcast, pop culture. So we interview people in the industry from, all just different aspects of entertainment. And I joined with them, I want to say right in the middle of the 2020 pandemic. I kind of came on board. I was a guest first to promote my books, and then we just really hit it off so well that they asked me to be an interviewer on the show. And it has been a lot of fun because, I didn't even know I could podcast before. It wasn't even something I had thought about. And I ended up, just taking to it naturally and being decent at it. So now I do a lot of the booking for the show. I'm going to learn how to edit soon so I can learn how to edit the episodes and just learn all about it. And I really enjoy it. It's super fun.
Yeah, because the honest truth is that it's still quite difficult to get people onto the show, which sounds madness, doesn't it? Because you think that everybody out there would like to speak about their book and chat about what it's like to be an author, but the honest truth inside them is they just cannot bring themselves to do it. It's kind of scary. It's one step too far.
I think it's scary because, and I think everyone deals with, with that fear of like public speaking. I think everyone has a little bit of that. But what people don't realize is that it does go away the more you do it.
Yeah.
In the very beginning, when I was having to do interviews, I would just dread them, like, oh God, I have to speak on camera, and I'd get all nervous. And then the more I did them, and then of course, joining Spoiler Country and being an interviewer myself, that really helped me get over, the fear of being recorded and all that stuff. And I was doing like 4 or 5 interviews a week at one point with some pretty like heavy hitters, right out the gate, they were like, okay, you're going to interview Dacre Stoker. And I'm like, what? Yeah. Just amazing people that I never would have imagined that I'd ever like be in the same room with, essentially. So it really helped get over that fear. So I encourage authors to just keep doing it, and it's not as scary.
Well, thank you for saying that. And the billionaire romances, but I want to say something else. The reason I just paused there, because it's kind of billionaire fantasy romances or billionaire
paranormal.
Paranormal romances.
Yeah.
Are they produced as audiobooks as well?
Not yet. I have, that is something that is my goal for this year, is to try to figure out how to get into the audio market. It's very expensive. So, I'm going to have to see what I'll be able to do with that. But I get asked all the time, are your books on audio? And, unfortunately right now they aren't. I think you can have Siri read it to you, or Alexa read it to you. If you really, one of my friends put my book in her Alexa or something, and it read it to her.
It is getting better. That the technology is getting better.
Yeah.
And the other possibility is to do it yourself. And I've been playing around, just reading chapters out, so that my voice, which is what you ought to do, is going to be, I possess my voice. It will be it's almost like trademarked to me. I don't want somebody else to be me. So I think you have to start now, because otherwise it's going to catch up on us very quickly, I guess.
Yeah, no, that's a great idea, to do it yourself. And that's what I'm going to kind of look into and see what happens,
So, Melissa, you said that there was another book in the pipeline. So is that going to be a continuation of this part of the story arc?
Well, kind of, sort of. So I do wrap up something pretty significant in this last book that came out. However, there is still part of that story that still needs to be told, a couple questions that need to be answered. So with this new couple in book 5, it's called After I Obey, and it is about a demon. His name is Rome, and he's an incubus demon, sex demon. And the woman is sort of like, she looks exactly like Lilith from hell, like a doppelganger. And they kind of run into each other randomly at a restaurant in LA, and he thinks it's Lilith, and he wants to kill her because she tortured demons, and she's not on the demons, Christmas list, essentially. So it turns out, she's not Lilith, but he can't figure out why she looks exactly like her. And they separate that night, and then the next day he goes to interview his new assistant, and it's her. So it's sort of like, it's just a weird twist of fate that she would happen to be the new assistant that was hired. So she has to work for him. He's a real estate billionaire in LA. And there's all kinds, I can't say too much because there is some stuff happening. with the plot line that was going on in the first 4 books, and then why she looks like Lilith and the mystery around that. And so he's really struggling with his feelings for her because he's starting to like her and get attracted to her, but at the same time her face is reminding him of this woman who brutalized him. So it's an interesting story, and I'm having a lot of fun playing around with like
and I think a
symbolism.
lot of people would be able to, that would reverberate with people, wouldn't it? Because I think a lot of people have have this kind of love-hate connection with somebody who they know that they shouldn't really like, but then there's something deep inside. So that's very clever.
Exactly.
Excellent. Well, I'm looking forward to that. And so when will that be out, do you think?
I believe it will be out by the end of February.
Oh, right. So really soon then. Wow.
Yeah.
How much writing do you do a day? Are you writing 2,000 words a day or more?
Yeah, I usually do. My goal is to get 3,000 a day.
Yeah.
And when I'm starting to get my momentum going and I'm reaching like the end of the draft, I will up that and sometimes do, 3,000 to 6,000 a day. And I've done 10 when I've really needed to make up for, maybe some lost time if I had a few days off, and I was like, okay, now I have to get back on track. So
the problem is with writing 10, I found, is then you can't do anything for 2 days. It's not that, I mean, physically it's difficult, but it's the worst thing is that I was just reading the other day in a paper about NaNoWriMo, and a journalist had written into the English Guardian and said that he tried it for this first ever time. And he said, and you'll laugh at this, he goes, I can't believe how much you have to make up. You have to imagine what the room is like. You have to imagine what the cup is like. You have to imagine what clothes they're wearing. I thought, yeah, you do. It's called writing.
It's called writing a book. Yeah. You literally have to create this world for people to, pretend that they can see it.
So I think that when you write 10,000 words of new ideas, it burns you out. That's what I find.
It's exhausting at times. Yeah. Like you were saying, physically too, your hands start to cramp up, your eyes from staring at the screen. Yeah, it can be difficult. And I think the best thing to do though, for me, is to have an extensive outline. When I have an extensive outline, I tend to write faster and without getting stuck, with, in different plot holes and things like that. So if I have a good outline and I'm in the zone, I can write 10,000 words and it doesn't feel like it, it's when you're like struggling and you're having a blockage, like what am I doing with this scene? What am I doing with these chapters? Then it's like pulling teeth to get me to write, 3,000 words even, because I'm just like resisting.
Yeah. I totally understand what you mean there. And that's a good way of explaining it.
Yeah.
And I was going to ask you actually, if you've got a huge series and you said that you didn't really know where it was going to end, it's like an endless series. I just wondered how you actually can picture the arc. But what I suppose you're doing is the same as what everybody does, which is you're writing chapters or scenes, but your scenes just happen to be a book long.
That's exactly. No, it's a great way to put it. Basically they're just little mini like TV shows, essentially, like little mini series, because each couple has their arc complete by the end of each little book. So I feel like when I say open, I think of like a TV show, when you think of things like the Vampire Diaries or the originals, where, every season is like a new monster, a new conflict. And as long as I can think of ideas or get inspired, then I'll keep adding, more books to that series. And if not, then, it definitely has finality with book 5. I tie up quite a bit of things. So so it doesn't need to continue. But then I, of course, I'm thinking of a spin-off series already about, I introduced some witches into the last book and into book 5. So I'd love to do a spin-off series about these witches in New Orleans and the vampire court there. And, I just get all excited. So yeah, we'll see.
Have you ever had anything supernatural happen to you? I mean, why would you be interested in supernatural and fantasy?
That's a really good question. I think when I was a teenager, I really wanted to like meet a vampire. I read Anne Rice. I was such a huge Anne Rice fan, and then of course, like V.C. Andrews and Stephen King. And so I just was so fascinated with like the romanticism of it all, the Gothic, culture genre, and of vampires being, because of course like Dracula was was not exactly, he was romantic, but he was also quite like monstrous, I thought, and scary. And same with like Nosferatu.
Yeah.
So when you had these, like Anne Rice came along with Lestat and Louis, she made these vampires essentially like billionaires. They were well dressed and could travel and speak different languages and were cultured. And and they were immortal. And I think that we're all sort of drawn to like the concept of immortality and, living forever.
Yeah, which is why we follow things like Superman as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, all cartoon characters are immortal, aren't they? Because they never ever grow up.
Right.
It's at the same age now as he always was,
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, I think, but as far as anything supernatural, I mean, I've had a couple like ghost encounters, I guess, or what I'm told, was probably a ghost or was probably haunted.
Yeah.
But I also am very, as much as I love fantasy, I do love science as well. And so whenever something like haunting happens, I always try to like make a scientific explanation for it, I guess.
Very sensible. I mean, sometimes there is no explanation, but it's always best to eradicate all of the obvious possibilities.
Exactly.
Well, it's been really lovely and exciting to talk to you, and I congratulate you for everything you've done so far, and obviously wish you all the success in the future. So where should listeners go then to get your most recent title? Where would you want them to go?
Well, all of I'm exclusively on Kindle Unlimited, so you can go to Amazon and type in my name, and all my books will come up. And then I do have a couple urban fantasy series, which I was mentioning earlier, that are with City Hall Press, and those are wide, so you can find those on Kobo and iBooks and Barnes and Noble and things. But also, if you just go to my website too, melissasercia.com, I have links to everything.
A lot of my readers want to have a hardcover as well. Have you got any hardcover books?
I have one. I have my box set for Blood and Darkness is done with the hardcover, and it's absolutely beautiful. I love it. But it is. I definitely want to get all of my books hardcovered, especially my independent one. Yeah, so I'm just trying to. I think Amazon just recently introduced.
Just started it. Yeah.
Hardcover. Yeah. So I'm curious.
At least it's open now to everybody. It's an expensive way of doing it, but people do like, especially younger readers, do like to possess and hold something which they can say is theirs.
Yeah. Well, and selfishly, I think I would just do it for myself too, just so I could have a copy of it. And, it doesn't, it costs something to make it, but eventually, it doesn't really cost you anything to have it available. So I think, selfishly, I would just do it so I could have a copy in my house.
That makes sense perfectly. And where should people go if they want to follow you? Say, for example, they just want to see what you're doing each day. Do you encourage that sort of thing?
Yeah, I post quite frequently. Lately, I do go like every couple of days. But I'm on Twitter at Fluid Ghost. And then on Instagram, I'm at Melissa Sercia Writes. Facebook, I have, I think it's Melissa Sercia 11. And there's also a group for Immortal Billionaires. Yeah, and you can join, and I post fun stuff. I actually just posted a picture. It's funny you asked me about actors. For the first book that came out in that series, After I Fall, the vampire was an Italian vampire. And there's an actor named Michele Morone who, is getting really popular here. And so I posted a photo he had on his Instagram of himself reading a copy of Dracula. And I thought, that's so interesting because I feel like he should play the vampire in my novel. Yeah. So I posted that on my group page to kind of show and have fun with that with everyone.
Brilliant. Well, that's fantastic. Yeah. So have we asked everything that you would like me to chat about? Have you got everything out that you wanted to get out?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me on the show. I mean, I just I've had so much fun chatting with you, and I could talk about books and nerd out on them, all day.
Well, it's been exciting and wonderful to have you on the show, and wishing you every success in the future. And
thank you.
Keep up the good work, please, Melissa.
Thank you. I will.
Bye.
Bye.